Next guest considers fellow Gulf Coast Republican Congressman Steve Scalise a mentor and works very closely with him.
Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is on the GOP baseball team, and he worked with Scalise late into the night on Tuesday, and he joins us now. First of all, thank you so much for getting up early with us this morning.
I'm grateful to be on, and thank you to all the fellow Americans who have been praying for my dear friend Steve Scalise.
So tell us what your thoughts were yesterday. First of all, as we mentioned, you're a member of the team. By chance, you weren't there. I'm sure, along with the rest of us, you heard all of the horrific descriptions of what was going on there. What were your thoughts?
Well, it's terrible when we live in a time where political violence is in any way occurring or acceptable. And here we obviously have a circumstance where Republicans were being targeted. My colleagues who were leaving the baseball practice right before the shooting began were very clear when they spoke to the shooter that he was asking whether or not it was the Republican team or the Democratic team that was playing. After he received confirmation that it was the Republican team, he went and retrieved his firearm and began his assault. This is an act of cowardice. It should not be acceptable in any way in our country, and I'm so grateful that leaders on all sides of the political spectrum have condemned this attack. And I think we as a country have to raise our gaze and look to our common destiny and our common humanity and see what we can do to bring the country together after this horrible day.
Well, Congressman, I want to ask you kind of a tough question here, but I do think it's fair. In a time when politics has become so divisive and there is just so much talk and everybody's so dragged apart, do you think this is a message to politicians to tone it down? Because it seems to me that a lot of this comes from that kind of rhetoric that we hear from both sides that gets people so angry.
Sure, and I'm not saying that our differences don't matter. Our differences absolutely do matter, but it is the common destiny that we share as Americans that has to matter more. And so certainly in our political debate and in our dialogue, we ought to be able to point out where we disagree and where we have different views for the country, but we should not allow our rhetoric to reach the point of incitement. You know, we look all over the world where Americans go and do a great deal of work to stop incitement, whether it's in the Middle East or Latin America. And so here at home, I think we can do a far better job setting a good example for the world and for our fellow citizens that political discourse and debate is just that. It's debate. It's not something where we would come to blows or wish any physical harm on anyone.
Yeah, as we mentioned, you're a personal friend of Congressman Scalise. If it hadn't been for him being in a leadership position as the whip, there would not have been additional police at the scene. He had additional, protection. So when you heard about the shooting itself, I mean, he was standing on the second base, and now he's in critical condition, preparing for this charity baseball game that they are going to have tonight. Have you had an opportunity to speak with anyone personally who was there?
Oh, yeah. Among many of the colleagues, the sentiment when we opened the House yesterday was that if Steve Scalise had not been at baseball practice, and he is a constant fixture at baseball practice, but had he not been there, instead of praying for the recovery of one of our colleagues, we would be mourning the loss of many of them. Regular members of Congress, we don't travel with security details. Matter of fact, I tend to think that it's part of our job to be accessible, and we need to be regular folks just like the people that we're so blessed to serve. But those in our leadership are more frequently targets of death threats and threats to their security. And so because he was present, it was very beneficial for all others who were at practice, because had he not been there, the only people with guns would have been the bad guy. Certainly, the good guys wouldn't have had any guns, and that would have been a far more difficult circumstance to deal with.
And they had baseball bats.
Exactly, yeah. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Our best wishes to you and your friend in the hospital.